My name is Nathaniel Clark, and I will be your narrator today. Stories never walk into our lives fully formed, they arrive in fragments, moments of ache, triumph, and choice. What I am about to share is not fiction stitched with exaggeration, but a soul's quiet rebellion against rejection and condescension. It is the story of a young woman named Eleanor Hayes, who was belittled by the wealthy circle surrounding her fiancé, only to rise far beyond the same people who once considered her unworthy. I work really hard to make videos for you all, so please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Also, make sure to tell me your name and where you are watching this story from. Let's start the story. This tale unfolds in New York City, a place where opulence towers in glass skyscrapers, where ambitions are both crushed and elevated, and where the struggle of belonging collides with the hunger to succeed. Eleanor was not born into wealth, nor did she possess the silver spoon her fiancé's friends flaunted so graciously. She had something else: vision, resilience, and a dream that would carry her through storms. It was the spring of 2013 when she first stepped into the glossy apartment on the Upper East Side with Daniel, her fiancé. His friends, Wall Street heirs and budding entrepreneurs with names polished like brands, awaited them with the smug assurance of people who had never been denied anything in life. Eleanor arrived in a cobalt blue dress, modest yet elegant, and carried with her the nervous warmth of someone stepping into a territory that did not quite feel like home. She smiled, she extended her hand politely, but their eyes told her everything. They saw her as an outsider. "So, what is it that you do, Eleanor?" asked Valerie Bennett, a woman wrapped in couture silk, sipping champagne as though it were air. "I'm working on developing a small business idea," Eleanor replied. "A startup in the wellness sector. It's in the early stages, but it's something I believe in." The silence that followed was sharper than ridicule. Then a ripple of polite laughter, not cruel in words but in tone, sliced through her composure. "A startup?" another friend scoffed. "That's adorable. But Daniel, you could be marrying into so much more security, couldn't you?" Her face burned, but she held her smile, dignified, unshaken in appearance. Inside, however, the words planted roots of doubt. When the evening ended, she noticed how Daniel never defended her, never redirected the contempt his friends poured on her dreams. He stood silent, complicit, choosing comfort in their approval over loyalty to her. That night, Eleanor realized something crucial: security purchased with silence was not love, not in the true sense. If she was to be rejected by the very people whose validation Daniel sought, then she would no longer bend toward their acceptance. She would rise above it. And so began her journey. Weeks later, Eleanor ended her engagement. She did not slam doors, did not throw accusations into the storm. Instead, she wrote Daniel a letter that brimmed with calm certainty. "You didn't defend me, Daniel, not once. You say you love me, but love is never silent when someone you claim as your own is belittled. I will not build my life in the shadow of people who do not see me. I choose myself." And with that, she left. The world beyond Daniel's circles was not kind either. Finances were uncertain, doors closed in her face, and investors dismissed her with the same tone his friends once used: inexperienced, unscalable, naive. But failure did not crush her. Each dismissal became her kindling. She moved into a one-bedroom Brooklyn apartment. Days blurred into nights as she sketched business models on napkins, researched consumer habits, and attended meetups across the city. She had no powerful surname, no trust fund to draw from, only a fierce determination and $7,000 in savings. Her venture, then just an idea, was built around holistic wellness, a blend of nutrition, mental health guidance, and technology. She named it Aurora Living, a company that would bring simplified, accessible wellness programs to everyday Americans who couldn't afford sleek Manhattan studios or high-end therapy. Eleanor's concept grew not from lofty ambition but from lived observation. She had watched her own mother, overworked, exhausted, battling stress, long for solutions that didn't cost thousands. Wellness, Eleanor believed, belonged to more than just the privileged. By 2015, Eleanor had quit her side jobs and dived fully into Aurora living. The first app prototype was terrible, buggy, half-functional, met with lukewarm reviews by beta users. She cried the night it launched, her body curled into itself against the cool glow of her laptop screen. Maybe her fiancé's friends had been right. Maybe she was chasing delusion. But then came a message. It was from a woman named Claire Thompson, a single mother in Ohio. "I know the app isn't perfect," Claire wrote, "but thank you. It's the first time I've had access to nutrition guidance without paying hundreds of dollars. Please don't stop. People like me need this." That single message breathed life back into Eleanor's fight. She printed it, taped it to the wall above her desk, and whispered to herself, "I am not building this for critics. I am building this for Claire." Every setback burned, but resilience hardened into habit. She devoured books on entrepreneurship, taught herself basic coding, and worked side by side with freelancers she paid in small installments. Money was forever tight. To fund operations, she took odd part-time jobs in cafes, research firms, and once even as a receptionist in a building where Daniel's friends held office suites. She passed them in the lobby, unnoticed as if invisible. But she was not invisible. She was simply waiting for her moment. By 2016, Aurora Living was functional enough to gain its first 100 paying users, mostly everyday women who stumbled upon the app through word of mouth. It was not much, not compared to the booming lifestyle brands in Manhattan, but for Eleanor, it was survival. She worked tirelessly out of Brooklyn coffee shops, her laptop stickers peeling, dark circles forming beneath her eyes. Yet, each time a new user signed up, she whispered their names aloud as though christening them into her vision of community. Recognition, though, came in the unlikeliest of forms. At a low-cost startup expo in Queens, her booth, small, built with cardboard backdrops and hand-drawn posters, was sandwiched between slick, venture-funded companies. Passers-by barely looked twice. But then a young journalist covering minority and women-owned startups stopped by her table. "So why wellness?" he asked, recorder clicking on. Eleanor smiled, tired but passionate. "Because it's been stolen from the people who need it the most. Wellness shouldn't be a luxury. It should be as accessible as clean water." Her words caught his attention. A month later, his article titled The Startup with a Heart in Brooklyn featured Eleanor's vision. The piece was small, hidden within a local publication, but it spread across social media and wellness forums and parenting communities. Her user numbers tripled within 6 months. Suddenly, she was no longer invisible. That winter, Eleanor was invited to a small wellness panel at NYU. It was unpaid, just a chance to share her journey, but she accepted eagerly. On the day of the event, as she entered the glass building, she froze. Among the attendees at the conference was none other than Valerie Bennett, the same woman who had once laughed at her adorable startup dream during that fateful dinner years ago. Valerie did not notice Eleanor at first. Draped in pearls and still exuding Upper East Side poise, she worked the room with the effortlessness of someone who thrived on attention. The years had been kind to her surface life, but Eleanor, observing from across the lobby, finally felt the power shift. When it was Eleanor's turn to speak on the panel, her voice trembled at first, but fire soon replaced nerves. She spoke about accessibility, about everyday resilience, about the mothers like Claire who fueled her mission. When she concluded, the room broke into applause, not thunderous, but sincere. Valerie clapped too, perhaps out of politeness. But her eyes betrayed recognition, the faint flicker of memory. For the first time, Valerie looked at Eleanor not with dismissive amusement, but something bordering on respect, or perhaps unease. By 2018, Aurora Living had grown into a modest but steadily scaling business. They launched subscription-based wellness kits mailed to users, including affordable supplements and daily journals alongside the app experience. Her small team of 5, huddled in a shared workspace, worked relentlessly. Eleanor was no longer scraping between odd jobs. She still lived simply, in the same Brooklyn apartment with mismatched furniture, but she paid herself a salary for the first time. She allowed herself one luxury, a small jade plant by her window, a symbol of growth, fragile yet persistent. Investors began circling. Some were tokenistic, more interested in branding her as a female founder story than believing in her product. Eleanor declined them. She had learned the cost of choosing approval over authenticity. She wanted partners, not benefactors. Her chance came when a mid-level venture fund focused on social impact startups offered her $500,000 in seed investment. It was not a fortune in New York terms, but it was a turning point. One of the fund's partners later confessed. "You weren't the flashiest founder. But you were the most believable. Entrepreneurs who talk about profits impress us. Entrepreneurs who talk about people inspire us." And so the fire spread. Success draws attention in waves, first from strangers, then from skeptics, and finally, from those who once dismissed you. In 2020, as the pandemic spurred demand for virtual wellness solutions, Aurora Living exploded. With millions locked in their homes, Eleanor's platform became a lifeline. She partnered with schools, workplaces, and even local governments to provide her wellness modules. By 2021, her company crossed $50 million in valuation. She had arrived. And then, almost poetically, an email arrived on her desk. It was an invitation to a charity gala hosted by Valerie and her husband, a fundraiser in Manhattan, attended by the city's most influential business leaders. Eleanor almost laughed when she read it. It wasn't fate. It was merely New York's tendency to fold circles in on themselves. She went. Not to flaunt, not to sneer, but simply to stand tall in the very room that once branded her unworthy. The chandeliers glittered that evening as though mocking the years Eleanor had spent under single light bulbs and late-night apartments. Valerie looked older, her confidence polished but thinner at the edges. When she saw Eleanor, her expression froze, but only for a moment. "Eleanor," she said carefully, glass of champagne in hand. "You've come quite far. Aurora, isn't it? I keep hearing about it." Eleanor smiled, calm, unhurried. "Yes. It's been an interesting journey." Around them, others joined, eager to meet her, the woman who built a wellness empire from nothing. For the first time, it was Valerie on the periphery while Eleanor held the circle. The rejection had come full circle, transformed into respect that could no longer be withheld. That night, as Eleanor left the gala, she thought of Daniel, too. She had heard he was now married to an heiress in Connecticut. She did not feel bitterness, nor regret, only gratitude, for his silence once pushed her toward her loudest triumph. By 2022, Aurora Living had become more than just a startup. It was now a movement, woven into the lives of millions of people across America. Teachers used it to introduce mindfulness to children, hospitals embedded parts of the platform into recovery programs, corporations licensed the software for their employees. Eleanor often reminded herself, all of this began with a rejection in an Upper East Side living room. Yet she never wore her success as revenge. She believed in building quietly, steadily, and with clarity of purpose. Still, the irony was not lost on her when investors who once turned her down now begged for a seat at the table. Her team had grown to 40 employees housed in a restored warehouse in Brooklyn, glass-paneled, covered in greenery, humming with energy. She did not create a sterile office, she built a sanctuary where people could work as humans, not machines. Reporters called her the wellness pioneer. Forbes placed her on the 30 Under 30 list, and Time magazine included her in the 100 Rising Influential Leaders. Yet Eleanor, in her own heart, still saw the taped message from Claire on her wall. That first thank you note was never replaced, never removed. It was her root. Success, however, came with new trials. The more visible Eleanor became, the more she was scrutinized. Anonymous critics claimed Aurora was commercializing wellness or capitalizing on vulnerability. Competitors filed baseless lawsuits, hoping to dent her momentum. Eleanor weathered each storm with a calm she had not possessed years earlier. She no longer sought to defend her worth. She knew now that her foundation was untouchable. But in quiet moments, she often asked herself, do I still belong to myself, or have I become another reflection of what the world demands? It was in one such period of questioning that she reconnected with her mother, Margaret Hayes. Her mother, now retired, reminded her. You don't owe the world your entire being, Eleanor. You started Aurora to give people a chance at wellness, but remember, you, too, deserve wellness. The words struck deep. Eleanor realized she had been sprinting across years, proving, building, conquering. But true power included rest, balance, and joy. She began taking weekends off, learning to cook again, even starting to paint small canvases, activities that grounded her and reminded her she was more than just a founder. I cannot tell this story without recounting the night of confrontation, the evening when rejection and triumph finally collided face-to-face in its rawest form. It was 2023, at a private entrepreneur roundtable. Eleanor was on the invite list, seated as a keynote guest. As she entered the sleek penthouse venue, there was Daniel, her former fiancé. He was grayer around the edges now, his tailored suit immaculate, but his eyes revealed something his wealth could not cover, weariness. He approached hesitantly. Eleanor? His voice held surprise, perhaps a degree of guilt. It's been years. She smiled politely. Yes, it has. I've read about your work. He shifted, uncomfortable. He was managing an investment firm, but the pandemic had strained him, and his company had not grown the way he once boasted it would. His circle stood thinner now, fewer hangers-on, more forced smiles. I wanted to say, I think what you've done is extraordinary, he said finally. There was no bitterness in her when she answered, only truth. Thank you. I suppose I should thank you, in part. If you had stood for me, perhaps I'd still be where they wanted me to be, silent, small. Sometimes rejection is just redirection. His face flushed. There were no sharp words, no drama. The conversation ended there, but its weight hung heavy. For once, he understood what it meant to be the one left behind. By 2024, Aurora Living prepared to go public. It was valued at nearly $500 million, and Eleanor's name became synonymous with accessible wellness innovation. Yet she refused to move into a mansion or flood her wardrobe with gowns. She bought her mother a comfortable cottage in Vermont and often escaped there to find quiet. In one particularly moving interview, she was asked, "What does success mean to you, Eleanor?" She paused before answering. For me, success isn't a valuation or a title. Success is watching a single mother in a small town open her phone and feel less alone. Success is giving someone the strength to choose life, health, balance even when the world tells them they don't deserve it. That's what Aurora is about. The world applauded, but those words were not crafted, they were simply her truth. At that moment, every laugh, every rejection, every scoff from her fiancé's wealthy friends lost its sting. They no longer defined her story. She did. The last time Eleanor saw Valerie was at a televised panel on entrepreneurship. Valerie, still wealthy but struggling with a failed luxury brand venture, sat across from Eleanor. Reporters naturally drew comparisons. Years back, Valerie had represented everything Eleanor was not. Now, Eleanor represented everything Valerie had wished to be: authentic, admired, impactful. When the cameras switched off, Valerie leaned in, her tone softer than before. You proved us all wrong. Eleanor only smiled. I didn't build Aurora to prove anyone wrong. I built it to prove something right. It was the final closure, polite, firm, without malice. Eleanor no longer needed revenge. Her very existence, her empire, her peace, that was victory enough. As your narrator, I have walked you through Eleanor Hayes's path not because it is rare, but because it is profound. The world is quick to dismiss dreams that don't align with wealth, status, or polish. Yet Eleanor's story shows us that rejection is not the end, it is the soil where something far greater can take root. Eleanor Hayes became a name etched into America's entrepreneurial lore. From dismissed fiancé to founder, from outsider to icon, she reminded us of the simplest truth: silence is sometimes betrayal, but belief in oneself is the loudest declaration of all. Her story does not end in boardrooms or galas. It continues in the lives of those who use her platform daily, in the mothers, teachers, workers, and students who find wellness within reach. That is her legacy. And perhaps, that is why stories like hers must be told again and again, so that no girl sitting in a room of people who dismiss her ever doubts the fire in her own hands.